You ever notice that the people telling you to maintain perfect balance are rarely building anything extraordinary? Think about that. Modern world worships balance. Balance your work, balance your family, balance your hobbies, balance your social life, your health, balance your side hustle. Balance, balance, balance. Everybody's talking about balance, but nobody wants to talk about what it actually takes to build something that's going to change your life. Because the truth is, extraordinary things are rarely built from balanced seasons. They're built from obsession. They're built from sacrifice. They're built from periods of life where one thing became more important than everything else. And that's uncomfortable for people to hear. Because we created a culture that wants extraordinary outcomes with ordinary levels of commitment. We want empire results with hobby level effort. We want freedom without sacrifice. We want legacy without obsession. We want the finish line without even running the race. But reality doesn't work like that. Every company you admire, every artist, every athlete you admire, every creator you admire, every entrepreneur, at some point in their life, they became wildly unbalanced. Not forever, but for a season, for a chapter, for a few years. Something had to give. Maybe it was sleep. Maybe it was comfort. Maybe it was weekends. Maybe it was parties, TV. Maybe it was being on your phone too much. Something got sacrificed because that's how construction works. When you're building a skyscraper, the entire site becomes a construction zone. Nobody walks through and says, you know what this place needs? More balance. No, it becomes messy, loud, focused, obsessive, because something is being built. And that's where I think a lot of people get trapped. They try to live like they've already arrived. They try to protect a lifestyle that they haven't earned yet. They want a schedule of a successful person before they've created success. The freedom before the sacrifice. The harvest before the planting. The reward before the struggle. And life doesn't negotiate that way. The truth is simple. There are seasons for building. There are seasons for enjoying what you've built. The problem is people want both at the same time. That's where frustration lives. Now, before somebody clips this and says Dread's telling everyone to go and destroy yourself and be wildly unbalanced, that's not what I'm saying. Burnout is real. Mental health matters. Relationships matter. Your body matters. Your spirit matters. What I'm saying is that balance isn't always equal. Balance changes depending on the season. A man working 16-hour days building a company isn't necessarily out of balance. He may be perfectly aligned with the season he's in. A mother working two jobs to create a better future for her children isn't necessarily out of balance. She's sacrificing in one season to create possibilities in another. A creator recording episodes after work while everybody else watches Netflix or what have you isn't necessarily obsessed. They're investing, they're planting, they're building. The real question isn't, am I balanced? The real question is, am I sacrificing the right things for the future I'm trying to create? Because sacrifice is unavoidable. Everybody sacrifices. The employee, the entrepreneur, investors sacrifice spending. Spenders sacrifice wealth. Everybody pays. The only difference is what you're paying for. That's why I don't believe in work-life balance. That shouldn't be the goal. I think alignment should be the goal, right? Are your priorities aligned with the future you want? Because if you tell me you want a different life, but you protect every comfort, you protect every weekend, every distraction, every convenience, every excuse, then maybe what you want isn't actually a different life. Maybe what you want is the fantasy of a different life. And those are two different things. The people who want to change their lives usually disappear for a while. You don't see them much. You don't hear from them much. They're missing birthdays, skipping happy hours, turning down invitations, working late, learning, building, failing, and then starting over. They're underground. And while everybody else is asking and wondering where they went, they're becoming someone new. And then one day, they pop back up. And everybody calls them lucky. But nobody sees the sacrifice. Nobody sees the nights. Nobody sees the loneliness. They only see the result. And that's where balance gets misunderstood. Balance isn't something you protect while building. Balance is often something you earn after building. The goal isn't to become unbalanced forever. The goal is to be strategically unbalanced long enough to create options. Because there's a difference between being trapped by your work and choosing your work because it creates freedom. One is survival, the other is construction. And maybe that's the real conversation. Maybe the question isn't, how do I balance everything? Maybe the question is, what am I willing to give up temporarily to create the life I want permanently? Because every dream has a price. Every freedom has a cost. Every extraordinary life requires an extraordinary season, or two, or three. The people who build remarkable things understand this. The people who don't usually spend their lives protecting comfort and wondering why nothing ever changes. And that's the trade that nobody talks about. You can spend a few years building a life most people will never have, or you can spend your entire life protecting a routine you'll never escape. The choice has always been yours. The bill comes either way. One of the most dangerous things that can happen to a person isn't failure. In my opinion, it's comfort. Failure hurts. Failure like wakes you up. Failure forces questions. Comfort doesn't. Comfort says, maybe next year we'll get them. You deserve a break. One more weekend, one more month. Before you know it, years disappear. Not because you were suffering, but because you were comfortable enough to stay exactly where you were. That's the trap nobody warns you about. Pain demands change. Comfort kills it. I've met people with huge dreams, people who wanted businesses, books, podcasts, studios, legacies, but they were comfortable enough to postpone every one of them. The dream didn't die. It got delayed. Then it got delayed again. Then delayed again. Until one day you can't tell the difference between your dream and the excuse. Most dreams don't die from failing, they die from being rescheduled so many times. Sometimes building something is lonely, especially when it starts working. People think success attracts people, but sometimes it separates you from them because your schedule changes, priorities change, conversations change, your relationship with time changes. Everybody's going out to breakfast and you're editing. Everybody's watching television and you're researching. Everybody's sleeping and you're writing. And eventually you realize something. The distance isn't because you stopped caring about people. The distance exists because you're becoming somebody they don't understand yet. Because the future version of you sees things the current version of your friends cannot. And that's not their fault. They're living their season and you're living yours. Ambition isn't lonely because nobody loves you. It's lonely because nobody can see what you see yet. And to be honest, a lot of people aren't building, they're performing productivity. There's a difference. Being busy isn't impressive. Anybody could be busy. Building requires direction, right? Purpose, intention, movement. A person can spend 14 hours doing nothing. A builder could spend 3 hours focused creating something that changes their future. That's why I don't necessarily just admire hustle. I admire construction because anybody can run, but not everybody can build. The goal isn't to work harder than everybody else. The goal is to build something that keeps working after you're gone. But you got to be willing to sacrifice. That's why most people never escape, because they negotiate every time. They negotiate with every sacrifice, every opportunity that knocks. They calculate what they're going to lose versus what they're going to gain. And eventually they become experts at protecting their present situation, which makes them terrible at creating their future. Because every meaningful transformation requires temporary discomfort. Every single one. Think about it. The gym, discomfort. Starting a business, relationships, healing, learning, being a parent. Everything worth having asks something of you first. The universe rarely hands out rewards before effort. And the hardest years aren't even the beginning. The hardest years are in the middle point, where you sacrifice everything and you still don't know if it's working. The years where the supports maybe flamed out a little bit. Nobody notices, nobody cares. The years where you're building in silence, those years reveal who you really are. Because applause is easy motivation, but having your own personal belief and motivation is harder, especially when the results are invisible. That's where most people quit. Not because they failed, but because they got tired of being unseen. The world celebrates chapter 20 and ignores the other 19 chapters it took to get there. When people say they want money, what they usually want is freedom. Freedom over time, opportunity, freedom over who gets access to their life. And freedom is expensive. Not because it costs money, but because it costs years. Years of discipline, years of learning, years of saying no. Years of building when nobody understands why. The uncomfortable truth is that freedom is often purchased in advance. The price is paid long before the reward arrives. Freedom isn't bought with dollars, it's bought with years. I don't think balance is the enemy. Balance is just being discussed at the wrong time. Because there is a season to build, and there is a season to rest, and there is a season to enjoy. The tragedy happens when most people confuse the two. When they try to live harvest lives during planting seasons. When they demand fruit from trees they never watered. When they want freedom without construction. Results without becoming. And maybe that's why so many people feel stuck. Not because they're incapable, not because they're unlucky, not because the world is against them, but because they never gave themselves permission to become obsessed with something bigger than comfort. And if you're listening to this right now, maybe that's your sign. Not to burn yourself out, not to destroy your life, but to stop pretending that the life you want can be built with leftover energy. Because it can't. The future you dream about deserves more than your spare time. It deserves your commitment, your focus, your sacrifice, your years. And one day when you're sitting inside a life you built with your own hands, you'll understand something most people never do. That the sacrifice wasn't your cost, the sacrifice was your investment. One day, the alarms will stop, the deadlines will stop, the late nights will stop, the uncertainty will stop. One day you'll walk through a life that once existed only in your imagination. The studio, the company, the freedom, the impact, whatever your version is. And on that day, nobody will see the mornings you didn't want to get up. Nobody will see the weekends you gave away. Nobody will see the moments you doubted yourself. Nobody will see the years you spent building in silence. They'll only see the result. But you'll know. You'll remember every sacrifice, every setback, every time you kept going when quitting probably would have been easier. And that's when you realize something. The goal was never to become rich. The goal was never to become successful. The goal was never to prove people wrong. The goal was to become the kind of person capable of building the life you want. Because the greatest thing you build isn't the business. It isn't the network. It isn't the money. It's you. The empire was never the destination. The empire was the tool that forged the builder. And when you finally understand that, you'll stop counting what it costs you and start appreciating what it makes you. This is Dreaad. And remember, most people spend their lives waiting for permission to become who they were meant to be. Don't wait. Build.